the Ayatollahs have the capacity to continue to wreak havoc around the world, because this comes down to the point again about who is actually doing this. It's not the weapons they use, it's a regime wanting to use the weapons. So as long as you have a regime in power that has access to nuclear material potentially, so it could create a dirty bomb, that could have access to biological agents, which it could release, that could quite happily, sort of unleash cyber terrorism to damage our societies in various ways and, sort of kill people that way, or even, conventional terrorism, then you've got the capacity to, really wreak havoc in the West. So it comes down again to this regime. And when you have a man in power who is guided, if you like, by religious ideology and fervor in that sense, sometimes logic goes out the window and, rational decisions become less clear. So it is, again, quite obvious that if you want to prevent any danger to the West, the way to do it is not to tie Iran up in nuclear deals, but to remove the regime. We know that Iranian terror cells exist and that Iran has intentions within Western countries. And what we don't know, of course, is how many. What we don't know are their ultimate capabilities, and we don't know how they would be activated, say, en masse to attack us. But it is quite clear that Iran has been operating with impunity for some time in our societies, which, of course, is why it is all the more important that we take action as a country in the UK, for example, to prescribe groups like the IRGC as terrorist organizations, because that disrupts the flow of the Iranians and prevents them from easily, sort of congregating and actually sort of provoking some of these terror attacks. So we've got tools we can use to diminish this, and why we're not doing that is beyond me right now. Clearly, Iran does have capabilities. We've seen their capabilities in the past. We've seen them use cyber terrorism. We've seen them plot terrorist attacks on other countries' soil. So I think you have to have a healthy appreciation that this is a dangerous country and it's a dangerous regime. But it's precisely because it's a dangerous regime that we should really be considering what our best interests are strategically in dealing with this regime. When someone has got the capacity to try and damage you, is your sort of approach to that regime to sort of try and mollify it and give it ground in various ways, or is it ultimately to crush it? Arguably, the only safe solution here is to remove this regime. When there are people out there who hate you, who tell you they hate you, and who then show you that they are willing to use force to, carry out that hate, you've kind of got a clear understanding of what their intentions and capabilities might be. You have to act. So again, it comes down to, do you want this regime that hates you to stay in power, or do you want it gone? I think the answer to that is quite clear. I think right now Iran's got little choice but to be on board with the ceasefire, because the alternative is continued degrading of its military capabilities, potentially degrading of its political capabilities, and that would undoubtedly to regime change. So the Iranians are probably making the sensible calculation. They need a breather right now to try and recalibrate what they're doing and just sort of assess the damage they've taken. If Iran does have significant stocks or even limited stocks of highly enriched uranium, then it could quite easily enrich that further to reach nuclear weapons grade material and could get a bomb very quickly. So there is, I think, a legitimate fear that they haven't had their uranium cleared out properly, and that's probably the focus of where people think the most likely breaches or the next, a moment of conflagration could occur. The regime has for decades tried to develop nuclear weapons. It seems quite clear that they will continue with this goal regardless of what has just happened, because that is inherent, if you like, to the DNA of the regime. Is the Ayatollah willing to die for it is a fascinating question, because in the past, the Iranians have always drawn back from that. They haven't been willing to die in exchange for, the nuclear program or anything that they feel is policy, actually. They've been, kind of fairly rational about preserving the regime as opposed to giving it up, always thinking that they can live for another day. So, for example, in 2003, when the Americans invaded Iraq, the Iranians worried they were next, and the regime decided to proactively volunteer to the Americans that it had a nuclear program and that it was willing to, get restrictions on it. Now, the point of that was fast forward 20 years, and we've been in a situation where they've been trying to develop, significant enriched uranium. So from that perspective, it's clear that they know they can always put the pause on things and then over the next 10, 20 years build it up again because they do see things in the long term rather than the short term. And quite clearly, it wants that nuclear capability. It wants to have nuclear weapons because it sees that as a tool to stop others from attacking it, but B, and this is where it becomes problematic, B, as a cover for its own aggressive actions overseas. So it's much harder to fight against Iran, as we're seeing, for example, with Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. If you know that the country's got nuclear weapons, it diminishes what others can do to stop your aggressive intentions. And so that is ultimately, I think, why they want it. It's not simply a defensive measure. This revolutionary regime has always been about exporting the revolution. It's not content to just stay in its borders. It wants to dominate the region. It wants to destroy Israel. It wants to, sort of promote death to America and death to Britain. Those are the things that are ideologically hardwired within it. And if you allow it to get that nuclear weapon, and it's clearly been trying for a long, long time through various covert and overt means to do that, then you run the risk that all those things will end up happening.